Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're working on another of the figures from the Adventures of Indiana Jones toy line by Kenner. Now recently Hasbro did re-release some of these figures, but there were a few that they didn't get round to, and one of those was the Cairo Swordsman that you see here in the middle. But quite often when you find a vintage Cairo Swordsman, he looks like this. He's missing his robes and he really looks a little bit strange. So today we are going to work out how to make some replacement robes for this vintage Kenner Cairo Swordsman. Let's get on with the project. So here we have a vintage Kenner Cairo Swordsman from the Adventures of Indiana Jones toy line, and as you can see he's a pretty nice looking figure. He comes with these dark black robes which have a red band around the middle, and without those he looks like this, which is a little bit strange and a little bit odd looking. So what we need to do is make some replacement robes for this figure. Now I've made quite a lot of robes for these vintage Kenner figures, and I was hoping that I could just use a pattern from one I've previously made. Here's the replacement Sala robes. I've also made robes for the map room version of Indiana Jones, but actually all of the robes seem to have different designs to them, so we are going to have to make something from scratch today. So we need to take the robes off this figure and work out how they are constructed. So let's take a look at that. So we can remove his swords, and then on the side of this figure there is actually a press stud which I haven't seen on any of the others. So we undo that little press stud and you can see that we have this belt that comes around, and it's only sewed on at one point on that side. If we then take the rest of this off, we can see how the thing is put together. And the way to see how something is put together is to actually turn it inside out, because then you can see where all of the seams are and where all of the sewing is, and hopefully from that we can create a pattern. So here you go, this is the robe inside out, and you can see it's actually made out of one piece of black material. So we've got one piece of black material that then is folded over the top, and we get round to the front. So we've got a seam all the way down the edge under the arms. We have hems on the arm holes, so those are folded over and sewn. There's a hem also on the bottom of the robe, and it does look like there is a hem around the sort of neck and the front. So there's going to be quite a lot of sewing to do, but before we can do any of that I need to turn this into a pattern that we can work on. So I'm going to take this into Photoshop and see what I can make. So let's do a bit of Photoshop work. So after a little bit of time in Photoshop, this is what I've managed to create. It's as close as I think I can get to the original shape of this robe. It's a pretty awkward one, in fact probably one of the more awkward ones that I've had to design, but I think it should work. So what I've done is I've printed this out just onto an A4 sheet of paper, and on the back I've stuck a bit of double-sided sticky tape. So let's get this cut out and then we can start constructing. Now we have the pattern cut out, we can sort out some fabric. And the original fabric of this is more like sort of t-shirt material, but I find t-shirt material incredibly hard to work with. So I'm actually going to use something different, and I'm going to use toy knit, which you have seen me use multiple times on this channel. This is the sort of stuff that the robes from Jedi era Star Wars figures were made out of. It's incredibly easy to work with. You can cut it nicely, it doesn't fray, and I've got it in multiple colours. So here I have it in black, and I think that is a pretty close sort of match to the original black. So that's what we're going to use, but we also need this little bit of sort of cord here, and I've been onto eBay and I've bought some braided cord. So this is some braided cotton cord. I bought a meter's worth, and this is a 5mm in diameter cord. I think again that is a pretty close match. This is actually a little bit flatter, but I think the overall effect will be pretty nice. So I'm going to be using that to replace the belt, and we need this at an early stage because you can see that this cord here is actually sewn into this seam on the side of the robe. So once we get to that point, we're going to have to sew in a piece of this even before we add the press stud. So I've got this at an early stage. So as you saw, I had already put some double-sided tape on the back of this. I'm just going to remove the covering, take a little bit of the stick of this off by sticking it onto my trousers. We'll stick this onto this fabric and cut it out, and then we can start sewing. The first thing to do with the sewing is actually to sew a few hems on, and I have started on this side here. You can see that I've just sewn a little hem down what will be the armhole. I need to do the same on this side. I've also got to sew a little hem on the bottom of these two pieces and on the bottom of this as well. That just sort of neatens up the edge. When you're doing Star Wars figures and Star Wars figure capes, they don't have any of this sort of detail, but these Kenner Adventures of Indiana Jones figures, the capes were made really nicely. There's a lot more sort of going on with them, and I think they've done that due to the fabric that's used, because the fabric that they've used does tend to fray quite a lot, so you have to hem the edges, otherwise it will fall apart. But this toy knit stuff that is used on the Star Wars figures is much more forgiving, so you could get away with not doing this and just sort of trimming these a little bit shorter. But I want to try and make this look as close to the original as possible, so I'm going to quickly go around and I'll hem the rest of these. There is supposed to be a hem as well around this sort of neck hole. That one I may leave because I'm just not confident in my sewing skills to actually get a hem around there, but I may try it at the end. But let's do all of the other hems first anyway, just to get it looking as neat and close to the original as possible. So here is the armhole, so I've just got to fold that over just a small amount. I'm folding maybe sort of less than 5mm. I've got some thread and a needle, and I'll just sew along this, and then I'll do the bottom edges as well. Now I've got all of those hems done, we can actually start making this look like the robe. So we're going to fold this over. We'll make sure the good side, which is going to be the outside and the end, is actually on the inside. So we have to fold these little flaps down like that, and everything should start to line up. And we have one key thing to remember, that we need to actually put in the red cord. So this is the original one. You can see there's just a little bit of the red cord coming out on the right hand side if we're looking at the back of the robes. So I've got my cord here, and I'm just going to cut off a small piece of that. About that length should do. And when I'm sewing down just under the armpit there, I'm going to put the cord in, and we'll sew over that as well. I will actually add that to this pattern because I realise I've missed it. It needs to be about there, but I will add that to that. So now what we've got to do is sew along this edge here. So we're going to sew all the way down to the bottom, and as I say, we'll put the cord in there, and then we will do the same on the other side. On the other side though, we don't need to add the cord. So let's get sewing, and this will start to then look like the robes. With all of that sewn, we can now turn this the right way around and give it a test on the figure to see if it actually fits. And this is the first time I'm doing this, because this is the first time I've actually made this cape. So hopefully everything will work. It may be I need to do a few modifications. Sometimes my sort of patterns end up being a bit small or a bit large. It's very hard to judge when you're making something like this for the first time. But we can always hope that this will just work first go. So let's turn this the right way around. So we turn those sleeves back out like that. That's looking good. And now let's put the figure inside and see what it looks like. So both arms need to go in like that. Yeah, those sleeves are looking good. And then we have to sort of wrap it around. So we wrap it around the front like that. We can move his arms back down like so. And then this cord that we've sewn in needs to wrap all the way around his body, and we'll have to do some snap fastenings in a second, but we can just sort of hold that in place. If I move his arm down, we can see what that looks like. That is really not bad at all. Let me bring the original one in and we'll put them side by side. I'm very happy with that. It's pretty much the same size. I think I've got the arms the right length. The actual sort of fall of the robe looks pretty close. Yeah, I would say that's pretty good. So yeah, I'm very happy with how that's turned out. Now we need to add the fastenings to this, and for that we are using some snap fastenings, because that's exactly what they've used on this. They've used some silver ones. I just happen to have these black ones, and these are 6mm snap fasteners. So I need to sew one part of the snap fastener onto this end here, which is the bit that we've sewn into the robes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this cord around, and I'll work out how long that needs to be, and then we'll sew the other fastener on the end, because I also want to sort of fold over the end of this cord, because you can see it's got a black internal piece. So if I fold it over and sew that so it sort of looks more like that, you won't see that black piece. So let's get those two snap fasteners on, and then that should all be done.
toy-polloi. That is incorrect. Try again.
And so here we go. Here is the finished Cairo Swordsman, and I'm so happy with how this has turned out. It's a really complicated pattern to make, but I think I've got it as close as I possibly can. The only thing I haven't done is done the seam around the sort of the main opening of it. That's a little bit beyond my sewing skills, but it could easily be done. If you're good at sewing, you could just easily run around the edge of that and just finish it off. But even without that done, as you can see, it really does look like the original one. So on the left hand side we have the original version of the Cairo Swordsman, and on the right hand side we have the version with my own handmade cape, and as you can see, it's pretty hard to spot. I've covered quite a lot of the capes now for the Adventures of Indiana Jones figure line, and each one has its own sort of different issues, and each one is constructed in a different way, so it's always interesting to work on, and I think this one certainly has been the most complicated so far. So if you have a Cairo Swordsman without his robes, head on over to toy-polloi.com and you will be able to download the pattern for free and have a go at making your own version. As you can see, it takes a little bit of sort of working out, but you can get there and you can get something that looks really nice. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help support the channel, then why not think about becoming a Patreon or YouTube channel member. You get early access to all of my restoration videos and also access to an exclusive series called On the Cutting Mat, where you'll see projects that you won't see anywhere else on this channel. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.